Hello, welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called My 10 Favourite Songs Ranked. Right, this should be the big one. It isn't. The big one is my 10 or 20 favourite progressive rock albums ranked. That's my big one in terms of you lot. That's what you really want to hear. Right, but songs are the most important bit. Without songs, there's nothing. Right, you want to know what makes a great musician, what makes them great is their songs. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of videos where I rate my 10 favourite singers. Are these technically the greatest singers of all time? No, in most cases what's made them great is the songs that they've sung. Right, songs are the pure balance of everything that makes music great. It's the balance of the formal, right, with the content. It's those two things in perfect marriage. It's about something in the world that is a story or an idea mixed with music, which is so great at emoting the visceral, the emotional. And you put those two things together, that becomes really powerful. So powerful is this thing that I didn't want to have to discuss it at the beginning of this video because I knew I'd be there for 3/4 of an hour. So there's another video that came out a couple of days before this one, which is called What Makes All Songs Great. I will be putting a thing up here now, hopefully, that will link to that. So watch that first, because it really puts my argument about what makes all songs great. All of them, not just a few, you know. And so, I was going to talk about Rick Beato then, because I got the title off Rick Beato, but I think if you are a fan of Rick Beato, there's a lot of chat about Rick Beato on that video, which I hopefully will entertain you. And Rick, if you did watch that video and then you come back to watch this video, get yourself a cup of tea. I'm going to entertain you, Rick. I'm going to do this like I'm chatting to you, Rick. Here are my 10 favourite songs, Rick, of all time, and I'm going to tell you why I like them. I'm not going to be going through the chord progressions or the production or all played on. I'm not going to be saying that. In fact, I don't know what I'm going to be saying because I got nothing planned. I never have anything planned. I'm like a jazz musician about to riff on it. I've made the list. I've gone over the list a few times. I've got the list. I know bits about some of them, and some of them I know loads and loads about, right? This list could change at any moment. As I was sat here, I looked at the list and I thought to myself, is Baggy Trousers by Madness on that list? That just came into my head straight off. And of course it's not. And Baggy Trousers is like one of my favourite songs of all time. It is a work of absolute genius. It's an anomaly. I don't know how a band like that could ever write a tune that is so sophisticated and strange and yet says so much and personifies what the song's about so well. Baggy Trousers by Madness, one of the greatest songs ever written. It's not on the list. It's not here. It's not here. You know. So we're gonna have to just go with what I came up with. But I've been going over this for a week, and I think these are my 10 favourite songs of all time on this list here. So, should we just kick off and get straight into it? At number 10, I have a song that is probably the song I have been listening to for the shortest amount of time. Many of these songs I've been listening to for like 20, 30 years, and they're just my ultimate favourite song. This is a song and album that I've come to quite recently. Anyone who's watching this channel can see me evolving to starting to believe that this band is perhaps the greatest band of all time. Definitely the greatest progressive rock band of all time, perhaps. Can he actually say that? Are they better than Yes? Are they better than Pink Floyd? Can he really say this? I don't know. I just, more and more, I am starting to think that this is one of the greatest bands that's ever existed. You know, but they're a difficult listen, and they are, of course, Cardiacs. And in 1996, they made an album called Sing to God, which they made some incredible albums, and I'm checking them all out. I'm listening to Cardiacs every single night at the moment. And this one is slowly rising to being, in my mind, their greatest album. On that album, there is a 9-minute epic called Dirty Boy. When I first heard this, I was instantly brought to tears. I was brought to tears by the fact that this song is at once unbelievably spiritual and profane at the same time. Like the blues, like all music of the 20th century, personified. It sounds religious. It sounds respectful and uplifting. And yet in the lyrics and the subject matter, which I'm not going to try and get into here, if you want to know what some people think this song is about, then go and Google it. But for all its description of the profane, of the scatological, it feels like somebody singing to God. It's one of the most uplifting songs I've ever heard in my life. An incredible sense of melody, an incredible sense of harmony, and that harmony is functioning in a way. I said I wasn't going to talk about the harmony, didn't I? Sorry. But the harmony is functioning in a way that the cadences are moving up all the time. They're moving and twisting as though somebody is looking up to the heavens. It is like a hymn. It is like a hymn. I actually made some notes on the Cardiacs here, and I'm going to read out some of these notes about this album. Angelic tones like a hymn from another galaxy. Infernal contrast, punk, prog, quickly moves away from the rock to some sort of modern classical insanity. Right? But sometimes sounding like cheeky Cockney Chas and Daves, but with strange tempo shifts, incredible female vocal hooks at certain points. This is me talking about the album as a whole. A huge rock sound like the Beach Boys that slowly transforms into modern classical pop, prog, punk insanity. These are the notes and I gave up. I thought, how am I supposed to describe this band? How am I supposed to describe and get across? And set at the centre of this album and in the centre of the discography is this tune, Dirty Boy. Dirty Boy eventually sort of gets into this upwardly spiraling loop of heavenly, screaming, sort of visceral. I'm trying to come with a word to describe this song. It's absolutely incredible. The bass player on this album, John Paul, he moves in the same progressive rock circles I moved in. I've actually made contact with him, and I'm going to do a video on the album Sing to God, but I'm not going to say much more about this, but it's not going to be a normal type of video, and I'm hoping to get a couple of interviews with Cardiacs fans, and hopefully John, who I have messaged but he hasn't got back to me, maybe he doesn't want to talk to me about it. I'm sure he does, really. But see, fate's very strange. Is John plays for a band called Life Signs, which is run by a guy called John Young, incredible keyboardist who I've played with once, and I've contacted John, and in a few weeks they are playing in my hometown, literally a mile up the road. So I'm going to go and see them, and I really want to sit down with John and have a chat about this incredible album, which could well be one of the greatest albums ever made. And Dirty Boy is one of the greatest songs ever made at number 10. Shall I move on? At number 9, I have Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden. When that whole grunge thing emerged in the 90s, it wasn't Nirvana for me. The band for me was Soundgarden. Soundgarden seemed to pull in more progressive rock influences, more Zeppelin, more Black Sabbath. They were heavier, they were darker, instrumentally more interesting. In the early days of Soundgarden, very heavy, very shrieky, very noisy, strong punk influence. But as time goes on, they start to bring in the progressive elements, and they start to, refine what they're doing. I think grunge comes out as a sort of bold move back towards more punk tendencies for rock music, which is exactly what rock needed at that time. Challenging the sort of overblown nonsense of, hair metal bands like Poison, And a bit of dead end that had become thrash metal as well, which at that point, Metallica move away from. In other words, going back to the idea of the song more, and not just the fact that you're playing very fast and very heavy. Grunge did all that, but he does it in quite a visceral, punky way to start off with. Soundgarden start to bring in those progressive elements that we've talked about so much on this channel. The use of odd time signatures, of arrangements, of different harmonic structures, of different production techniques. By the time we get to Black Hole Sun, it's at an absolute genius level of compositionally incredible. Almost like classical music. Really strange use of odd time signatures, strange use of arrangements within that, Chris Cornell's guitar part on here, which utilises, I think, a dadgad tuning, definitely a drop D tuning, to create chords that aren't structured in the normal fashion. All of those chords are following cadences, but they are. So I'm doing it like you can't. Rick, you're right. You do have to talk about the chords. But it's a bit like Joni Mitchell. These chords are rootless, suspended chords. The harmony. We're continually not quite sure where we at with it. It's perhaps the most nihilist song ever written. It talks about sort of Chris Cornell's desperation and disdain for his all existence. He doesn't just want to wipe himself out, he wants to wipe everything out. That's the only way he can cleanse himself. Black hole sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Right, what's the rain? The rain is the internal, mood, existential angst that he resides in. And what he prays for is for a black hole to come and wander its way into our solar system and park itself next to the sun, and then slowly suck that sun up and everything into itself. And so everything is eradicated. It's so nihilist, but at the same time it's so beautiful. The melody of the verses is so obtuse and strange. It doesn't follow normal cadences. And yet the chorus, for all this heaviness and weirdness, has all the hook value you need to make this a huge hit record. And on my list, some of these are hit records and some of them aren't. I think they all pretty much are hit records, actually. But this has got to be one of the weirdest massive hit records of all time. So that's why I got number 9 is Black Hole Sun by Soundgarden. And number 8 we have another hit record which is even weirder than Black Hole Sun. This is probably one of the weirdest tunes to ever grace the top of the charts in pop music history. And it's Ghosts by Japan. Japan, a really interesting band. They sort of are formed in the mid-70s, and they start off as a sort of art rock, sort of Roxy Music cover type band. They're very much coming out of that. They're quite derivative. David Sylvian isn't necessarily the strongest singer in the world. They're not brilliant musicians or anything, but they managed to form something which is, I think, is a lot more about of style over content. They start a little bit like that, post-punky, art pop, in that sort of new wave world where it's about what the band looks like, what they represent. They don't have success straight away. The truth is the albums are okay, and they start to build on that, but they start to go towards this much more experimental, electronic approach. David Sylvian at one point discovers jazz, and I believe Steve Jansen does as well, because I've always felt that there's a link between Steve Jansen's drum approach and Steve Gadd. So they get this jazz stroke electronic influence in there, and the music starts to evolve. By the time they get to their last album, they've turned into one of the greatest art, electronic, progressive, post-punk, new wave bands of all time, and they are going to have a huge influence on progressive rock. A huge influence, you know. They're not classed as a progressive rock band, and I think that's because if you take the albums as a whole, they're not. But by Tin Drum is as prog as Discipline is by King Crimson. Ghosts on that album, the final album, is another upgrade from what the rest of the album. The rest of the album is really strange, sort of, you know, Oriental stroke African tribal electronica with sort of funk grooves. You can take an influence from Talking Heads perhaps in there and a few other things. But Ghosts isn't like that. Ghosts is so minimal and strange. Right? It's a beautiful song. David Sylvian obviously wrote it on acoustic guitar, and it can be performed that way, and it would be an incredible song. A song about, you know, ghosts, as in the ghosts of our pasts, you know, the things that haunt us. Okay? But that idea of being haunted is played out by very minimal instrumentation, which I think is pretty much analog synths and a vibraphone or glockenspiel. That's it. There's only 3 people playing on the album. The great Mick Karn is not even on there. But this, with those minimal attributes, you never feel that you're lacking anything from this song. And this song should be avant-garde, but it's not. You know, when it was released as a single, and I think it was the 3rd single off the album, because of course the record company would never have thought of pushing this out. It became Japan's biggest hit record. It's got a beautiful melody, a beautiful hook. It does all the things you want to do. But I think the reason is because the mechanism that does that, which is the chords and the harmony that you would normally have in an acoustic guitar, have been taken away. And in taking that away, we're just left with his voice singing the melody. And I really believe that a great song, it is just about the lyrics and the melody. Nothing else counts. It doesn't matter what else you do, you know. I said elsewhere that a producer once said to me something which took me a lot of time to get my head around, that if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly. If you've had a great idea for a song and the song works, you won't go wrong in execution because the song has a life of its own. I'm sure at some point on some awful Christmas advert in the future, somebody will think they're very clever in doing some insipid piano with dreary voiced cover version of Ghosts by Japan, and it will appear somewhere in that sort of mawkish, sentimental way that they are covering a lot of these 80s pop songs by, you know, taking out all the life out of them and having some dreamy female vocalist singing while this piano tinkles away in the background. I can't stand it, but the truth is the song will still work when it's done like that. Right? Because what makes a song great is not the instrumentation, the production and the chords and all that. It's the melody and the way the melody supports what the song is about. Right, let's move on. What have I got at number 7? At number 7 I have Hang On to a Dream by Tim Hardin. Tim Hardin came out of that sort of 60s folks scene in the 60s, which is why he's from the 60s. Oh, you're so good at this, Andy. He sort of emerges, gets himself a deal. Very strong jazz influence with Tim Hardin. He makes a number of albums. He writes some of the greatest songs ever written. If I Were Carpenter, which is covered by everybody, including Robert Plant, and I used to play with Robert. That used to play that tune, If I Were Carpenter, when I was with Robert. I'll mention Robert Plant on here, and it's relevant because the person that got me into Tim Hardin was Robert Plant. Robert is, being a singer and a great singer, he's interested in the song, and so there was always this tension between me being the jazz proggy guy and being into all that stuff, and him being purely into the song and what the song's about. But there were certain artists Tim Buckley was another one where I could see a crossover. I had a way in, and Tim Harding was one of those. I think it was the jazz thing about him. So I started to listen to Tim Harding a lot, and there's some incredible songs there. If I Were Carpenter, Reason to Believe, which I think Rod Stewart covered. My favourite is Hang On to a Dream. It's such a short tune. I think there's a couple of versions actually. There might be one that's got a longer introduction, but the song itself is very short. It's literally 2 minutes. It's desperate, it's nihilist, but it's poignant. It's an absolute beautiful song. It's probably the most obscure song on this list is Hang On to a Dream, although Dirty Boy by Cardiacs is pretty obscure. Tim Harding, for those who watch this channel, there's an ill-fated collaboration that just lasted a couple of gigs when I was researching this video. There's an ill-fated collaboration between Tim Harding and the European progressive rock band Can, which is documented on a couple of bootleg live gigs. Apparently when Tim Harding actually worked with Can, he ended up having a huge row with them about what I do not know, but it could well have been the dichotomy that exists between instrumental music, improvised instrumental music that Can eschew, and the idea of the song, which is what Tim Harding represents. And there's a schism between those things in music, which I would really like to explore more. And I have discussed somewhat on the previous video to this, but I found that quite interesting, and it's probably a fact that is not known to the watchers of this channel. And also it gives me a chance to talk about Can. I don't know that much about Can. I'm a big fan of the drummer Jackie Leibniz, whatever his name is. I managed to. Do you see how I did that? I said the surname. I don't know how to pronounce it. Jackie Leibniz. That's the drummer of Can. Jackie Leibniz. That guy. Anyway, incredible. I came across Jackie's drumming on an album by Jar Wobble and Brian Eno. Absolutely incredible. But I don't know that much about Can. I'm going to talk about European prog at some point, but I am really digressing away from the song. Let's forget all those obscure, improvising, structureless, lyricless bands that exist out in European prog world. Let's get back into the song where it's about something and it says something about humanity, And that idea of hanging on to a dream, we've all done it, haven't we? When you need to move on and you can't move on because you keep hanging on to the dream and not the reality. Okay? Poor old Tim Harding was troubled with drug addiction for most of his life, and he died of an overdose in 1980. I think sort of wiping him off. Anyone who dies in the 70s or 80s, early 80s, it sort of wipes them off the sort of mainstream perception. Because I don't think the idea of us as valuing rock artists as legends, that didn't happen till post Live Aid. And anybody that died before then, unless it's a Jimi Hendrix or a Janis Joplin, and had already achieved legendary status, they've sort of got forgotten. And it's a shame with Tim Harding, because I really believe him to be one of the great songwriters of the last 50 years. So that's who I've got at number 7, Hang On to a Dream by Tim Harding. At number 6, I have another great 60s legendary songwriter, artist, perhaps the greatest songwriter of the last 50 years. And that's Joni Mitchell. And the tune I want to put forth is Little Green, off the album Blue. I think the thing with Joni is, the key to Joni is, because I didn't get Joni Mitchell to start off with. When I first heard her, I didn't get her. And the reason was because I was a muso. I was listening to jazz and rock, and I knew Pat Metheny and Jacko had played with her, and I bought her Gia, and I just didn't get it. Where's the solos? Where's the bombast? I didn't understand it. And I got quite frustrated by this until I started to listen to the lyrics. So I count Joni as being the artist that dragged me back away from the sort of dead end of just being a muso and thinking it's all about the playing and all about how great the music is, which is a trap that musicians could fall into. She got me thinking about what's the song about? And I think the fact that Joni Mitchell can sing about what seems really mundane, she'll just be singing about sat in a bar somewhere and chatting to somebody and being told a funny story and then getting in the car and driving across town, and she'll sing on that level, but she'll also deal with deep philosophical, issues at the same time. The music by Joni Mitchell that first pulled me in was not the jazz stuff, not the albums like Mingus and Hijira and Shadows of Light. It was actually the early folk stuff, where her diction and a delivery is so accurate and perfect. Joni Mitchell comes along in the 60s. She has a love of folk music. She has grasped what Bob Dylan has done, the democratization of the song, moving away from pretty voices and star personality to what is the song about. This is what Dylan brought into music. But she does have a love of jazz, and she has a love of vocal groups, and she finds a way of writing songs where she can do the trick that Dylan does of stripping away some of that artifice, so you're forced to listen to the lyrics. Her melodies still do that. Her melodies are long and twisting, and they often don't resolve, but they still have the beauty of a great jazz standard at the same time. She manages to pull all those things together. But that rootless that's in the music, the shifting idea of the seasons of nature and how nature can just come and pull you away and take you off, the idea of fate, the fact of not being in control of where you're going, of not being happy in the situation you're in, the rootlessness of the draw of being being able to see that frozen river outside and being able to just jump on it and skate away to somewhere else to escape where you're at the moment. All these ideas that are so prevalent in Joni's stuff, well, that comes from something that we never knew at the time, is the fact that Joni Mitchell had to give away her child at a very young age. And in giving away a child, she, I think, almost put the idea of a future on hold, it seems. She exists then in the now. She just exists in the sort of shallow world of just relationships and the music business and what she's doing. And she sort of is able to take that. And by the album Blue, she is representing that so truthfully that truth almost hurts. And on that album is a tune called Little Green. And what Little Green is it takes all that nature imagery and it ties it up and creates a song for the child that she has given away. It's the only thing she has. The only thing she has that will protect her from the world is the name that she gives that child, and the name is Little Green, which symbolises the idea of hope, the idea that after the winter will come the spring and the daffodils will come out and the green will emerge. And that's all she has to try and protect her and try and explain to her why she had to do what she had to do giving that child away. And this is all true. It's not metaphoric, it's all in there. This song, when I got into Joni Mitchell, I then started to study so much, which is why I know about the story of giving a child away. One of the things that's interesting with Joni is as soon as she got back in touch with her daughter, which eventually she did, at that point, creatively, everything seems to have stopped. I don't know if anyone else has ever said this or noticed this, or maybe I've got this wrong and it hasn't worked like that because I'm not a super expert. All this incredible music has come from the fact that Joni Mitchell has lived a life with the effect of giving a child away. It's an incredible and all this for me is personified in the track Little Green, which I cannot put on. And sometimes when I teach songwriting at college, I will analyse this. I have a number of songs that I analyse. And I just thought of another song I analyse that I haven't got on my list. I'll have to do that as an honourable mention at the end. Oh my God, there's so many great songs. But this Little Green Ones is difficult for me to do the lesson on, because it doesn't matter how many times I've heard it. So as I get those lyrics on and I play the track to the students, I'm in tears. It upsets me so much, and it's a testament to Joni's absolute genius that she can encapsulate something like that in a 3-minute record. Absolutely incredible. And I got it at number 6. What must I have that's better than this? Well, at number 5 I have Wichita Lineman by Glenn Campbell, written by the great Jimmy Webb. This is just the most perfect pop song that I can think of. Absolutely beautiful and evocatively arranged and produced, with an incredible story. A story that's so strange. This idea that, up a telegraph pole is a guy there, and he's sat there and he's a lineman. He looks after the lines, the telephone lines in that county, and he's able to dial in and hear the conversations of somebody he loves, and the idea of being removed in that way. I think with the advent of the internet, this has become much more apparent amongst people. So this song has gained power as time has gone, but it's just an incredible song. Glenn Campbell was an incredible musician, incredible singer, an incredible guitar player, and that guitar solo that he delivers, with the tremolo in the middle of that, is absolutely beautiful. This is an example, when I said earlier about that producer that said, once said to me, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing badly, yeah, and it is, and I'm pretty sure that me not being able to sing, and I'm not a singer-songwriter, I'm not a singer, but I'm pretty sure if I picked up an acoustic guitar and I was to play that song now, despite my terrible interpretation, there would still be a power in that song, in the basic melody and the lyrics of what the song's about, and the ability of the song to convey that feeling. But my God, is this well executed? So that's what I got. Number 5 is Wichita Lineman by the great Glenn Campbell, written by the great Jimmy Webb, who wrote a whole bunch of brilliant songs, Up and Away and all that stuff, and brilliant songwriters. So many songwriters that have just, have gone unsung in the history of popular music. Number 4, I have Embraceable You by George Gershwin. And I've got a version you have to listen to. There is the incredible Billie Holiday version of Embraceable You. But the one I'm going to go for is the Ella Fitzgerald version of the Songbook album. Ella Fitzgerald sings, George Gershwin arranged by the great Nelson Riddle. Right, so when it comes to songs in the 20th century, there's a history there, and I'm not going to try and get into that full history here. I bet now I say that I will. The idea of sort of European, Irish, Scottish folk songs, European folk songs coming in and then transmuting through that sort of American folk approach that melds in with sort of the blues and jazz. This creates a sort of the Americanization, Afro-Americanization of traditional folk songs. And that gives us absolutely everything. Sat at number 2, the next one is one of those songs. I'm going to get onto that in a minute, but it's great to talk about that. Out of that tradition comes the American musical tradition. Cole Porter, Irving Berlin, George Gershwin, who are writing songs. And these songs emerge at the same time as recording industry emerges. So these are the first great songs. They're popular songs from musicals. Jazz musicians play those popular songs, and they are able to take those songs and transmute them like alchemists. That's the idea of playing the jazz standard. That then goes back into the Hollywood musical, and it goes round and round like this. We have a whole bunch of incredible songs from that canon. What we call jazz standards. I grew up with these, and I absolutely love these tunes. I really, really do. I had to pick one, and I knew it would have to go high on the list, and here it is. It's Embraceable You by George Gershwin. Jazz musicians were able then to take those songs and sing them using the techniques of jazz and to move them into something else. They could improvise, and those improvisations were then taken and arranged. They were arranged by different arrangers, firstly by people like Fletcher Henderson, who would take the stuff that Louis Armstrong would do and then he would arrange. I am doing the history of the song here. We then get those arrangements, right? Now, if you want an example of that at its actual peak, you will not get any greater than Ella Fitzgerald singing Embraceable You, arranged by Nelson Riddle in 1957 or something like that. Can't tell you the exact date. On the album, Ella Fitzgerald sings George Gershwin. This, for me, is just the personification of beauty. Right? And as I think about it, I'm speechless. This is simple. This is not metaphorical, philosophical songwriting. This is a song about love. This is what rock and roll is going to come and work against. This is what we are going to move away from. But here we have the most incredible example of a great singer with a great arrangement singing an incredible song. It's an absolutely beautiful, beautiful rendition. The song itself is beautiful, but Ella Fitzgerald is like, she takes the great innovations of Louis Armstrong, of Bessie Smith, of Billie Holiday, and she puts all that together. And this reminds me of a story that I once heard, that when Ella Fitzgerald was on her deathbed, she turned around to the person next to her and she goes, "Why did everybody like me? What made them all like me so much? Why was I so popular?" Which seems so unbelievable that one of the greatest singers of all time would say that about themselves. And then she turned around and went, I know what it is. It was the songs. Well, Ella Fitzgerald there's no one greater. When I hear her voice, because I've heard it since I was born. I grew up with Ella Fitzgerald. My dad would play her every single night. Her voice just goes into my system straight away. If I hear Ella Fitzgerald, I can recognise Ella Fitzgerald's voice on a song I've never heard within a matter of seconds, because it's part of my system. She is such an incredible singer with such a wide range. On this, she's not like singing in that dirty, soulful blues style. She's not improvising and scatting. She is singing in a rich, almost like Sarah Vaughan, beautiful, full voice, which she could also do so well. And she sounds absolutely incredible. But she's right. A great singer is only as great as the songs they can sing. So that's what I have at number 4. Is Embraceable You by Ella Fitzgerald. Sung by Ella Fitzgerald, by George Gershwin, and arranged by Nelson Riddle. As a specific one that I put on there. What have I got at number 3? I have got at number 3 Nature Boy, that was written by Eden R. Bez. What a weird guy Eden R. Bez was. And Nature Boy was first recorded, I think, which probably wasn't first recorded, but the first famous recording was by the great Nat King Cole, another incredible singer, an incredible pianist. And that song has just carried on and on and on. More recently, David Bowie did a cover version for, was it Romeo and Juliet? I think it was from Romeo and Juliet. And again, that song just goes on and on. This song's got something special about it, and I'm going to try and just talk very quickly about what I think it is. Nature Boy seems to be part of the jazz standard jazz world. It does the same thing as what Embraceable You does. It's a jazz standard. It's sung by jazz singers. But on that song, it points to something futuristic, I think, and it points to some sort of hippie ideal that rock and roll's going to now grab at. And it's interesting because Eden R. Bez, the guy who wrote it, was perhaps the first hippie. He emerged in the 1940s with his long hair and his flowing robes, looking very Jesus-like, wearing his sandals. He used to live in a camp out at the bottom of the first L in the Hollywood sign. He would sit below. Think about this hippie Jesus looking character sat camped out at the bottom of the Hollywood sign in Los Angeles, looking over all that madness, writing the song Nature Boy. Right? That's the incredible thing, isn't it, really? He was really promoted sort of an outdoor hippie lifestyle, alternative lifestyle. And he is a precursor to what's going to happen in the 60s in American culture especially. He's the first guy to do that. So here we have perhaps, this is almost like the first rock song. Right? Which is, I think, why it's managed to stay alive. It's one of the few jazz standards that a rock musician could cover, and it sounds like when Bowie does it, sounds absolutely normal. It doesn't sound like they're harking back to something that they don't really understand, because I think the lyric has something of the sort of Nietzschean Zarathustra feel about it. This idea of somebody coming down from the mountains, a bit like John Lydon, and prophesizing to the world the truth, which is something I think which then gets embodied within rock and roll. And I think all the great Robert Plants and the Elvis Presleys and the John Lydons and the Robert Smiths and the Morrises all have that Zarathustrian, Nietzschean aspect to them, which is personified in this song Nature Boy by Eden Arbez. Number 2, I have a song which I cannot tell you who it's written by, because whoever wrote it, it is lost in the mists of time. These songs that came over from Scotland and Ireland and Northern Europe and came into America and that told stories, this oral tradition of passing down stories through song that's been in folk music back to the time immemorial. You know, that's what songs are about. That tell stories that we can learn from, and these stories change as the culture changes. You know, the stories change, but the little threads of truth go through. This is the real history of the song, and I really want to represent that on my list, and I've got that at number 2 with the tune St. James Infirmary, and I'm going to go with the Louis Armstrong version of it. Louis Armstrong is the father of jazz. He's the most important musician of the 20th century. Okay? If you play the drums or guitar and bass, you know, and you try and phrase, or you try and swing, or you try and play with some groove, or you try and improvise, or you just want to make sounds or do something weird, in that DNA of what you're doing is Louis Armstrong. Louis Armstrong gave all of that, he gave us that, all of that stuff. But he wasn't just a trumpet player, he was a singer. And when Louis Armstrong started singing, it was a revolution, because of the way he could change and transmute a song, which then gets picked up by all the jazz singers. Billie Holiday listened to Louis, Ella listened to Louis. It's what we're talking about in this second half of this video. Louis was a great singer of songs. He wrote some great songs, and here with St. James Infirmary, I think we have one of the great performances of one of the greatest songs ever written, which is rooted in the history of songs going back to the beginning of time. Okay, St. James Infirmary seems to have its roots in all sorts of different European and British, probably I think Scottish folk, Irish folk songs. It tells a story of a corpse in a hospital, and how that corpse got there. Somebody going down to see that corpse. This is pretty dark stuff. Louis is able to, through his humour, is imbue this song with all that sort of gothic darkness that you would want, but also there's a sense of humour there as he cracks a few jokes and you know, has a little laugh and a chuckle to himself as he tells this story, which I won't spoil here. You have to go and listen to it. That history of the song is very important. It's the balance that exists against all the instrumental opulence that we champion here on this channel. So that's what I got at number 2. So I'm going to now go to number 1. All right, number 1 I have, which I really truly believe, this won't shift, I think this is the greatest song of the 20th century. It embodies all that jazz standard thing we're talking about. It embodies all the protest songs of the 60s. It embodies all the sort of history of folk songs of the American tradition, of rock and roll, of shock. It's got everything. This song is the greatest song of the 20th century, without a doubt. This list, I could change stuff about it, but on the whole, I think this is the greatest song of the 20th century. It was written by Abel Meeropol. I can't even say the name. I didn't even know it was written by this person until I did the research for this video. Abel Meeropol. Do you know this songwriter? Well, this is the guy that wrote the greatest song of all time, in my opinion. It was made famous by one of the greatest singers of the 20th century, Billie Holiday. And it is the tune Strange Fruit. All right? Strange Fruit is one of the most incredible songs I have ever heard. Its shock value is still there today. I think it was banned at the time. It tells the tale of strange fruit hanging from a tree, and that fruit is the lynched body of a black man. In that song, Abel, or Billy, describes the crows plucking the dead flesh of this corpse. It's that heavy a song. There will never be a greater singer than Billie Holiday to sing that song. And the way she sings it is it's just a textbook example of how a great singer can sing a great song, and the way the melody, the lyrics, and what the song about, and then the way that singer then sells that song to the audience. All the great singers, the truly great singers, are not there trying to show you that they're great singers and they can hit these notes. It's none of that X Factor nonsense when you hear a great singer. They are inside the lyrics and they are singing the lyrics to you. But who can sing the lyrics to Strange Fruit and be inside those lyrics? Only somebody like Billie Holiday. Billie Holiday, I'm afraid, her life was far more common than the sort of myth would like to make out. She had a terrible upbringing. I think her mother was a prostitute. I think at one point she was attacked and abused as a child. She was also worked as a child prostitute. There are stories where she fell asleep in her grandmother's arms and awoke and the grandmother had died, and all these sort of things. Greatly deprived, then were going into an industry which didn't understand her, where she faced racism, where she had to work in, say, like Benny Goodman's band as a black singer, where she was not allowed to use the elevators at the white musicians, where hotels would ask them. I think it is Artie Shaw, actually. Artie Shaw, had to go and say, look, Billy, we can you not use the main elevators because you're upsetting some of the clients in these hotels we're stopping. And this awful life that she went through, where she in the end found solace in alcohol and in drugs, and by the time I think she was 45 when she died, an absolute crime, that she died so young, and that all that suffering is in her voice, which was not a virtuoso voice. Billie Holiday had about an octave range. She had a slight, she didn't have the sort of power of a Bessie Smith. She didn't have the lyrical richness of a Sarah Vaughan or a Ella Fitzgerald. But she had an understanding of phrasing and a way to deliver a song which is unparalleled, literally unparalleled. And then she channels all of that suffering, but also a playfulness and a joy of singing is in Billy's singing. In the 1930s, her voice is so playful and light and beautifully phrased. By the end of her life, her voice is pretty much gone, but she's replaced that with such an understanding of the instrument which she's in command with. And some of those songs are just, I'm thinking of something like Autumn in New York. She recorded in the 1950s. But for me, well, whatever it is, God bless the child, all incredible songs. But for me, Strange Fruit is on another level to all of those. And this song seems to sum up everything that we're going to encounter right up until today. Right up until the best of the best songs that are out there at the moment, the best hip-hop songs, the best protest songs, whatever it is, no one will ever better this song. So that's what I've got at number 1, Strange Fruit. The song that isn't on my list that I just popped into my head was A Once in a Lifetime by Talking Heads. So I'll give that an honourable mention. An incredible song, Once in a Lifetime, which sort of describes the journey of a droplet of water and uses that as a metaphor for the idea that we are living in an eternally recurring cycle that we are stuck in. Wow! That's incredible, isn't it? That didn't make the list. Oh, well, we're up at 51 minutes. That was a long video. I didn't want to talk that long about this, but I have, and that's the way it is. Here we are. Thanks for watching this video. Those are my 10 favourite songs of all time. I'm not saying they're the greatest songs, but they're definitely 10 of my favourite songs. There's probably another 10 that I could bring up. They're just flooding into my head at the moment, all these incredible songs. Next thing I'm going to do is have a look at singers. We haven't talked about singers. I'm going to go do my 10 favourite male singers and my 10 favourite female singers. It's getting ever so dark in here, and so I'm sure I'm sat here in a right gloomy, as we've talked about these songs, it's got gloomy. I'm sat here in the dark now. So I think I better switch off and go inside and do something else. So I'm at the end, haven't I? I've run out of stuff to say. It's finished. It's over. Right, go away now. It's done, everybody. It's done. Rick Beato, if you're still watching, thanks for watching. Get me on your channel. You need me on your channel. I don't know in what respects or something, whatever you want to talk about. I can talk about my playing in all these progressive rock bands, or I could talk about Robert Plant. I can chat about, other things, whatever you think, but I want to be on your channel, Rick. I'm a big fan, right? And hopefully somebody here has messaged you and said, check out this guy who's talked about you, and Rick will go, oh my God, Andy Edwards has talked about me. I better go and check him out. So Rick, if you're still there, thanks a lot for watching. Love you. We love you here. And if you like the video, like it. If you want to subscribe, then subscribe. If you want to know more, then you've got to press that bell so you get notified of my next videos. And if you want to support me, there's a Patreon down here. And I'm putting more and more content on Patreon, and Patreon's getting more weirder, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing over on Patreon. I think I finally cracked it, and I think we're getting quite a bit of content up. There's all sorts of different content. Last few months I've been putting a lot of written content, writing essays, putting my thoughts down there, using it as almost a sketch pad. And then people chime in and we have chats. It's really great. But there's some videos on there as well, which is all really good. So there we done. Finally, great, brilliant, lovely, brilliant, done. Thank you. See you on the next video. Bye.